So MALIFAUX 4th edition is here, or not here yet, it's a beta. As you can see here, Comprehensive Rules Guide Beta. And in this video we're going to go over the changes. And there is a few. So in this video we're basically going to cover the things that are updates that you need to know about, while ignoring everything that is as it already is. But I should emphasize that, once again, it's a beta, so it's hard to say how things are going to be in the end. Nothing is what we're saying in this video is, in the end, a certainty. A first big change is the maximum hand size is now 7. It's increased by 1, from 6 to 7. But there's also the possibility where, when you are performing a duel, you can discard a card with value 5 or lower from your hand by gaining a bonus flip and a suit of the discarded card's suit. This means that weak cards in your hand, like a 1, could be really good because that can turn into a bonus flip. There is no more initiative flip. Instead, the attacker is the starting player with the initiative. On turn 1, the attacker has initiative. On every turn after that, the player who did not activate the last model on the previous turn choose who gains the initiative. There is also no more passing, or there is, but there are no more pass tokens. During the activation phase, if the player has fewer models that have not yet activated this turn than all their opponents, or is tied for the fewest, and the previous activation was not passed, they may elect to pass. When a player passes, they immediately proceed to step D, transfer active player without activating any models. A past activation does not count as an activation for any game effect. Big important reminder here is that if you're not allowed to pass over and over, you're only allowed to do it 1, then you have to activate a model, then you can pass again, and then you can have to activate a model. So if your opponent has 10 models and you have 3 models and you want to pass as much as possible, your opponent are still going to have like a lot of end game activations, if I understand this correctly, just because of the fact that you're not allowed to pass and then pass again. But this will make it a lot easier and a lot more fair, because having a lot of because accumulating a lot of pass tokens seem to be a overpowered strategy they wanted to solve, and this should do it. There are now 3 types of damage. You have physical, magical, and unusual. And you have 3 types of attack: melee, missile, those did exist before, the gun and the claw, but now we also have magic, which has this cool symbol, which also changes how the armor works. So you have physical defense, armor, once per activation, reduce damage dealt to this model by 1. The same thing for magic, which is aegis, and then unusual defense, which is weird. Threatening demeanor, once per activation, reduce damage dealt to this model by 1. So this is both a buff and a nerf to armor. First and foremost, if you've already taken damage this activation, armor doesn't do anything more because it's once per activation now. However, as I understand it here, you can reduce a damage of 1 down to 0. So if someone just has 1 damage dealt this activation, you ignore it completely. But it also means that some attacks will go through your armor and vice versa. For example, we have incorporeal, and it has the armor icon on it. Reduce damage dealt to this model by 1. Damage from magic actions may not be reduced this way. So incorporeal here, as an example from the Gaki, is a new card. Protects it from physical damage but not magical. The general actions has been changed. We still have interact, but it's 1 inch instead of base contact. Walk, charge, and slam are basically the same, but concentrate is different. That one is gone. It's been replaced by prepare. Give this model adaptable, focus, or shielded token. So instead of only gaining a focus, you can gain 1 of the 3. And they have also removed disengaged, by the way. That takes us to conditions, which are now referred to as tokens. And it's a big change. The big takeaway is that you can't cumulatively collect several of the same conditions. For example, burning. At the end of the turn, deal 1 damage to this model and enemy models in base contact with it, then remove this token, or as MALIFAUX 3rd would have worked, end this condition. The takeaway here, once again, is that you can't have burning 15, you can only have burning yes or no. Same thing with distracted. When this model is target enemy model, it must remove this token or end this condition and have a minus flip action for that duel, then this is cancelled by focus. So you can't have more than one distracted, you can have distracted, yes or no. And the same thing with focused. We also have we have hastened, which is a different version of staggered. Staggered is still here and it functions the same way, but it's cancelled by hastened. And hastened increases SP, which is move. They have changed MV, move, to SP. So SP is doing the exact same thing as move. But they have a bunch of new conditions, or tokens I should say. For example, insight. Before performing a duel, this model may remove this token to look at the top card of this fate deck and may discard it. Injured is the same, but you can't stack it. You only have injured and it will reduce your def and VP by 1, just like before, but you can't have more than one. We did gain adaptable from doing the prepare action. Before performing a duel, this model may remove this token to add a suit of its choice for its duel total. This means that a minion that can't use a Soulstone could use the prepare action to gain the secured suit for its specific action with a trigger you want to have more easily. Also, if you remember in the beginning of the video, you can empower, you can discard a card of value 5 or less to gain an inbuilt suit to that flip. And here we have bolstered, which is the opposite to injured, where you increase def and VP and you discard this at the end of the phase, and it's cancelled by injury. It's the opposite to injury. We have a token called Craven. This model cannot declare the interact action and is ignored for its crew's strategies and schemes. At the end of this model's activation, remove this token. So yeah, it's basically a token that is making a model insignificant. We also have Entranced. This model's actions that target an enemy model cannot be cheated. After this model resolves an action targeting an enemy model, remove this token. There are some tricks in MALIFAUX where you prevent cheating. So this is probably an effect you apply on an enemy model to just hex them, make it harder, curse them, and just make it harder for that model to do cool things. The entire concept of shadow is gone. As it's gone, we don't need to explain what shadow means if you don't know what the MALIFAUX third shadow system worked. It's a little bit of a strange system. Instead, when a model with cover is targeted by an attack action, it reduces any damage is dealt that attacks damage triggers by 1. So it's like having armor, but instead of having it once per activation, it's just reducing the damage by 1 completely. Making cover a little bit stronger, because previously it was increasing your defense by 1 and it gave negative flips instead of armor 1. So armor 1, or this isn't even armor, it's better than armor 1 because armor can be ignored, and on the other hand cover can also be ignored, but this is basically giving you a very good protection. And there's a possibility that you could receive this from various magic attacks as well. You didn't do that before. Which takes us to damage in general, and there are no more damage flips, and I love that. There have been so many situations where an opponent flips 4 negative cards and they accidentally flipped into red joker, and even though I've cheated fate, I've been in cover and concealment and done a lot of stuff to make sure that damage flip gets as low as possible, they still do maximum +1 damage from that red joker effect. That can no longer happen. Instead, there's a flat starter. For example, here, tear apart. It has damage 2. So if it hits, it's gonna be damage 2. If you gain the critical strike, when this resolves, this action deals +1 damage. So it's a clean, simpler system that will result in a fewer amount of card flips, basically. However, there are modifiers. For example, deal +1 damage to the target for every raise initiated model receives in the duel unless the action was a magic attack. So for the claw and the gun, you can have raises. A raise is when you win by 5 or more, and each 5 increases the raise by 1. So if you win a duel by 10, you basically have 2 raises, which would equal into +2 damage. Even seeing a good example here, a model attempts a simple duel with a TN of 10, it flips a calculated duel total of 15, since it exceeded the required TN by 5, it would receive 1 raise. The model decides to cheat fate, increasing its final duel total to 21, it has now exceeded the required TN by 11, therefore receives 2 raises. The remaining excess 1 in this case is ignored. There are certain effects on various abilities, for example you can heal, and for each raise above the TN will increase the heal by 1. So there are an interesting appeal to try to win more. So this concept of trying to cheat fate and still lose the flip, but trying to reduce the amount of damage by removing raises on your opponent is still there. There are no more bonus actions, instead you have signature actions, which is similar but not the same. Before, in MALIFAUX 3rd edition, you had 2 actions and that is still the same, but then you had a bonus action. This is not the case. You still have 2 normal actions, but then you can do 1 more from only among your signature actions. So if you look here, you have Elemental Bolt and you have Etheric Passage on Dabbler. Now, you can do these as normal actions, however, you can then do 1 more as a signature action. Ultimately, as before, you more or less have 3 actions. The thing is that you can either do Elemental Bolt or Etheric Passage as your signature action. So you could, for example, do Walk, then Elemental Bolt as a normal action, and then do Elemental Bolt again as your signature action. Or you could do Elemental Bolt twice as your normal action and then a 3rd time as your signature action. And it can happen a little bit out of sequence. A model may declare 1 signature action per activation. This may occur any point during the model's activation, including after it has reached its normal action limit. Models may still use that same action multiple times during its activation, bearing once per... There could still be once per activation restrictions, of course. But here, a model has the option to declare multiple actions as their signature action. Only one of them may be declared as a signature action that activation, once again making that Elemental Bolt potentially 3 times. Hiring your crew is going to be very different. We're not going to go into that in detail in this video, because we haven't seen all the cards yet, so it's hard to get a good picture of how it's going to function in reality. As for example here, we only have a small sneak peek of how the cards is gonna look like. For example here, SP, that is move, defense, VP, size, so it's very similar. Fewer abilities, especially when you scroll down here. There's a lot less abilities on the master. That's usually different. The attacks here are still the same, but then we again come down here to the crew cards, which is basically a secondary card. It's not an upgrade, but it functions like a upgrade that attaches something to the entire crew's concept, you could say. And it's probably going to impact a lot on what the crew can do, and depending on what kind of crew card you might choose, there could be some variations to things and such. Titles are still going to remain the same, and I'm pretty sure they are not going to remove any models that you own. So suddenly you can't play like your Sonya Crid, don't worry. Or your Sonya Crid version 2 is still going to be there and such. Now when the game starts, you still choose the same kind of setup. Strategies are different, but each player simultaneously chooses a faction for the crew, just like before. Each faction determines each player's choice of model, the leader, and then normally the leader must be a master. Once both players have selected their leader, they reveal the name of the leader, and though not its title, simultaneously. And here comes a big difference. When hiring, you may not include more than 3 models that do not share a keyword with your leader, for example versatile or out of keyword. Regardless of faction and whether they are versatile, by default you may only hire 1 copy of a given. They're basically trying to prevent people from playing too much out of keyword, and they probably want people to play more close to the faction as it is intended, or sorry, inside the keyword as intended, and not mix factions, so to say. Then, After hiring your crew, up to 5 unspent points become Soulstones in your crew's Soulstone pool. And that means that you can't have more than 5 Soulstones after hiring. So they have basically nerfed the strategy where you have like 7 or more Soulstones in your pool, you send forward a tank, and you use all your Soulstones to make that henchman tank impossible, basically. This takes us to the next step of Soulstones that have also been drastically changed. And we're not going to go into detail how this is going to work, because I do believe there could be updates, as this is a beta. However, the big takeaway is that you can gain Soulstones, and you are going to gain a lot of Soulstones in general inside the game. So for example, if you look at the health bar, you see health bar with a Soulstone, health bar without a Soulstone. So some models, or most models, that die will give you a Soulstone when they die, which is something of a backup mechanic. You lose a lot of models, but you regain some potential comeback. This actually means that a strategy that don't kill your opponent's models, instead focus on scheming, might work out better, because you're not giving them that backup mechanic. But we also have some abilities that require a cost. For example, here you see an icon on Wildlands Queen, this is on Titania. Deal this action's damage to enemy models in base contact with an underbrush marker, ignoring loss. So it's a global effect, basically. By the way, you can maximum have 5 markers of one type, so you can maximum have 5 underbrush markers, so that is going to hinder this ability a little bit. But to activate this ability, you have to pay 2 Soulstones. You actually succeed this ability instantly, because the skill is 7 and the TN is 4. You still do a flip because you could get raises, and the damage is free. So yeah, this is a very costly, as it costs 2 Soulstones, but it's gonna hurt globally a lot of models potentially that accidentally is standing in these vegetations. And there's a lot of different potential abilities overall that is going to cost Soulstones here and there. For example, here you have custom firearm, ashes on the wildland. Place this model anywhere within 6 inches, then this model may declare an claw or close combat attack action. And to do that, you have to pay a Soulstone. That takes us to schemes, and here is a big change. Now, we're not going to go over all the schemes, because once again, this is a beta, so it could change the scheme pool, so to say. However, the big takeaway and the thing to know is that you only have 1 scheme at a time, but you can change the scheme you have. Once again, there's only 4 turns now instead of 5, and you can score victory points on the first turn. Otherwise, so far everything works kinda the same, except you reveal this scheme and you gain victory points, but then there's an additional VP option. So you gain either 1 or 2 on the moment you gain victory points from this. You don't gain victory points at the end of the game as before. So, scoring when this scheme is revealed, gain 1 VP. Additional VP, if the chosen model has a cost of 9 or greater, gain 1 additional VP when this scheme is revealed. And you reveal this when you have basically killed the chosen model when you selected this scheme. Then at the end of this turn, you may choose one among those 3. Harness the ley line, runic binding, frame job. I don't know what they do, and we don't really care right now. The big important thing is that you're changing your scheme. So you score or don't score VP from assassinate, and then you can change it. You can keep the assassinate if you think that you have a chance of scoring 2 VP next turn potentially, or you just change it because nah, I don't think assassinate's gonna work out. I want to have one of these other schemes instead. So now you're off to doing something new. In the end, you're going to have something of potentially 4 different schemes throughout the game, 1 each round. Strategies are still remaining the same, but there's gonna be a new strategy pool. For example, they are showcasing collapsing mines here as an example. So that was MALIFAUX 4th edition beta so far, some of the big changes. There's probably a few I have missed, but those were some of the big ones that's gonna have a big impact of the game. So you can see kind of how MALIFAUX 4 is going to basically look like. So far, I have to say I I really like it. It looks good. A lot of the changes are things I do personally improve upon. In any case, thank you so much for watching, and as always, we'll be back in the future with more MALIFAUX gameplay. And in the future, we're going to have some MALIFAUX 4th edition gameplay, once we can actually play it, because we need models with rules and such, but we'll get there.